So beginning today with this reminder of our framework that we've been using for some time now, that the reality is life is hard. It's very hard in all kinds of ways, and each of us has our own experiences to validate that. What we also have learned is that we are inclined, we're vulnerable to making life even harder. And that's where mindfulness comes in. Mindfulness is the alternative that can point us in the direction of freedom. And in this case, the freedom we're talking about is freedom from being attached to craving and fear, from getting too identified with craving and fear, so that they cause us to behave in ways, to have thoughts, to say things that make the hard things in life even harder. So we have these 5 ways in which we are inherently enough. And for today and Friday, as I laid out in the email that went out yesterday, we're going to break these 5 into 2 groups. The first group is the avoid and approach. These are resources that are just really essential to our well-being. If we don't know how to avoid the dangers in life, the threats of physical and emotional abuse, if we don't know how to avoid getting caught up and controlled by negative emotions, then we're going to be in serious trouble, somewhere between miserable and gone. And we also have to have this capacity for approaching that which is beneficial and enabling, that which is life-giving. So those are the what components of our inherent enoughness. The other 3 give us the how. How are we going to deal with avoid and approach? How are we going to deal with these 2 powerful energies skillfully in ways that don't make life harder, that take advantage of the opportunities, the reasons we have evolved with avoid and approach? And these 3, of course, are awareness, self-regulation, and learning. When we apply them skillfully to avoid, to staying away from danger, then they alert us to the dangers that are there. You're driving along the highway, somebody cuts you off, your brain, nervous system know how to react in that moment to avoid being in a collision. We know how to avoid all kinds of dangers in our lives that we learn about. In fact, I like to say that our nervous systems for avoiding are so sensitive that they help us avoid about 11 out of every 4 dangers we encounter. They also can lead to unskillful behavior. They can lead us to being caught up in irritation, frustration, when things are not going the way we want them to be going. They can lead to anger, indignation, righteous indignation, when we see unjust events and experiences, whether they're happening to us or others. They can lead to fear. It can put us in a position where we get caught up in the fears and we don't function very effectively. And if the fears become strong enough, they can lead to disdain, even hatred. So, in a way, we can think about avoid as being one of those powerful, powerful aspects of human of the human experience. It's sort of like fire. There was a time in this country when private residences and public buildings were extremely vulnerable to fire, when they were lighted by candles, for instance. I remember my grandparents telling stories of Christmas trees going up in flames because they had candles on them. Now we've learned how to harness fire so that even though it never happens, it's still a resource for us. Automobiles are extremely dangerous, and yet we've learned how to handle them. We've even gotten much better at more skillful in dealing with automobiles. So it's not like we want to eliminate this energy for avoiding. We want to use it skillfully. So let's do a little practice to work with it and give ourselves some direct experience with it. Again, this has been a pretty cognitive experience, and there might be a little extra energy or tension built up in ourselves. So this is a good time to take a couple of deep breaths. Fill those lungs all the way up to the shoulders. Hold that breath for a moment and slowly releasing it, allowing that extra tension and energy to flow out. Settling in to the surfaces we're sitting on and softening. And turning our attention to our breathing. Simply allowing ourselves to be aware of where the breathing is showing up in the body. Recalling now an experience or person or activity in your life that you typically prefer to avoid. An experience or person that you find to be a bit threatening or perhaps irritating, frustrating. Maybe even causes some anger and indignation. And thinking of the specifics. Who's involved? Where does this often happen? What's being said? Being fully aware of whatever fear or irritation or anger is present. Noticing the thoughts that are accompanying this experience. Noticing any physical sensations. Acknowledging the unpleasantness, difficulty of the situation. The fearful or irritated thoughts and sensations. Acknowledging that they're present. Allowing them to be present in this moment. And accepting the reality of this fear, unpleasantness, difficulty, irritation. Accepting the reality of it right here in this moment. And perhaps as a sense of space opens up around this experience, inquiring of yourself, what have been the consequences in the past of my avoiding, of my fear, of my irritation or anger? What thoughts, spoken words, actions have resulted from this fear or irritation? And investigating just a little bit more, we might inquire, what's beneath this fear? What's underneath this fear that we have? This urge to avoid, this inclination to be irritated or angry. Just a little open investigation. Simply noticing what's arising. We're not fixing, we're just being aware. And now inquiring, what alternatives are available to me in how I relate to this fear or irritation or anger? How might I relate to it differently? And in closing, taking a moment for reflecting on this experience, we've been applying awareness of this situation, how we've been open to learning about what's happening, how in creating alternatives, we're learning to self-regulate.